That old clock was running exactly 5 hours slow. That night, the clock chimed. Dong, 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 dong. 6 chimes rang out, echoing through the house that had been silent for far too long, while in reality, it was already deep into the night. 5 hours ago, Fang Hongjian walked back from outside, quietly holding on to a thought in his heart. Tonight, he would treat her well and persuade her not to let yesterday's incident create discord between husband and wife. 5 hours earlier, Sun Rouqia was waiting for him at home, quietly harboring a thought of her own. When he returns, she hoped he'd be willing to take the job at his aunt's factory, so the two of them could get through this period together on good terms. Both had good intentions. 5 hours later, both were gone. Qian Zhongshu wrote the final line about this old clock. This timepiece that had fallen behind, unwittingly, contained an irony and melancholy about human life, deeper than all words, all laughter and tears. Over 70 years have passed, and that line still remains. Not because of Fang Hongjian, not because of Sun Rouqia, it's because of that old clock, 5 hours slow, reflecting not just the end of a marriage, but a kind of desolation we've all experienced. Clearly set out with a heart determined to make a change, only to end up stumbling over yourself at some doorway. Maybe you've had nights like that too. You asked, "What are you thinking?" And they said, "Nothing." You knew you shouldn't ask again, but those 2 words were like a door left ajar, and you couldn't help yourself. You pushed it once more. The door didn't open. Instead, it closed even tighter. About Sun Rouqia, there's only one verdict that's widely circulated. She's far too calculating. They say she strategically pursued Fang Hongjian step by step, that after marriage she showed her true colors, revealing her real face, that she single-handedly turned a marriage into a battlefield. But there's one question that almost no one has seriously asked the Sun Rouqia we know. Whose version of Sun Rouqia is it? The narrative perspective of Fortress Besieged stays tightly bound to Fang Hongjian. Whatever he thinks, that's what we see. And Fang Hongjian is a weak man, prone to self-deception, who never truly loved Sun Rouqia. Can a man who doesn't love her fairly define who she is? This isn't a story about a scheming woman, nor is it a story about a heartless man's story. This is a story about why intelligent women sometimes apply their intelligence in the wrong places. Welcome to the Fanko Character Think Tank. I'm Fanko. Today, we're diving into Fortress Besieged, into the story of a woman who's been misunderstood for over 70 years. The answer begins at her most vulnerable moment. The 1940s, China. Amid the chaos of wartime, a group of people boarded a steamship heading to take up positions at a school called Sanlu University in Hunan. 5 people, 5 different agendas. Fang Hongjian had just been completely rejected by Tang Xiaofu in matters of the heart. Disheartened and dejected, he set off with this group, simply taking things one step at a time. This guy, to put it nicely, he was easygoing. To put it bluntly, he lacked conviction. When things came up, he never said no. He just went along with whatever was happening, letting others push him forward, almost never taking initiative himself. Sun Rouqia, the daughter of an ordinary newspaper clerk in Shanghai. Her family was middle class, and growing up, she was never valued at home. All of her parents' favoritism went to her younger brother. She understood very early on that no one would naturally be there to catch her when she fell. She had to rely on herself. Zhao Xinmei, Fang Hongjian's friend, the one who observed everything with a cold, detached eye throughout. At the start of the journey, Sun Rouqia was too shy to say a word. When she first appeared, she kept an extremely low profile, dressed plainly, calling everyone Uncle Zhao, Uncle Feng. She seemed like a harmless little sister. Fang Hongjian hadn't even looked at her properly. Couldn't tell if her face was round or flat. He completely didn't take her seriously. But the literary critic, C.T. Xia, saw through to the essence of it all. In A History of Modern Chinese Fiction, he wrote a chilling line: Sun Rouqia is setting up an elaborate trap to capture this unsuspecting friend of hers. A carefully orchestrated scheme had quietly begun, while Fang Hongjian remained completely oblivious. Let's take a closer look. Step 1. Eavesdropping. On the ship, Sun Rouqia secretly listened in on the conversation between Fang Hongjian and Zhao Xinmei. What was she listening for? She was doing something highly rational, studying this man, his personality, his weaknesses, what he responds to, how he handles situations. What she learned was, Fang Hongjian was weak and passive, someone who liked to go with the flow. He had just gone through a devastating emotional blow, and there was a void inside him that needed to be filled. He had a bit of vanity he couldn't quite hide. He liked being needed, liked feeling useful, liked playing the role of protector to those more vulnerable than himself. The role of protector. A clear character profile. She quietly took note of it all. Step 2. Showing vulnerability. Throughout the entire journey, Sun Rouqia maintained the same appearance: gentle, naive, helpless, needing to be taken care of. This wasn't a performance without foundation. A young woman in her early 20s, traveling alone to a remote mountainous region in Hunan, and in the group, aside from her, everyone was a man. Her traveling companion Li Meiding treated her with frivolous arrogance. The environment was unfamiliar, the language was incomprehensible, and society was full of hidden dangers for a woman traveling alone. In that era, a woman without any male protection meant she could face contempt, harassment, or even worse situations at any moment. She needed someone she could rely on. She needed to be safe on this journey. So, she said those words to Fang Hongjian. I just don't know how to deal with people at all. Dealing with people is such a nightmare. Mr. Fang, would you be willing to teach me? The precision of this statement lies in how it accomplishes two things simultaneously. First, it places Fang Hongjian in the position of teacher, which satisfied his vanity of wanting to be admired. And two, it declared her own vulnerability and need, awakening his masculine instinct to protect. The result was, it awakened all his protective instincts toward this young lady. Fang Hongjian began to notice her. Step 3. During their intimate nighttime journey, the 5 travelers once spent the night in a crude village hut. The mountain road was bumpy, conditions were harsh, and the night was exceptionally dark. That night, Sun Rouqia spoke in her sleep, her voice soft and tearful, saying, "Don't crush my red cotton jacket." Fang Hongjian woke with a start and struck a match. Sun Rouqia told him she had dreamed of a pair of child's hands pushing her and felt afraid. Fang Hongjian comforted her. This brief nighttime exchange, in Zhao Xinmei's observing eyes, was undoubtedly part of a calculated scheme. But in Fang Hongjian's own experience, it was genuine intimacy late at night. One person cries out in a dream, another turns on the light and says, "This kind of intimacy is something far more unforgettable than any daytime interaction could ever be." Step 4. Creating a sense of crisis through Lu Zixiao. Once they arrived at Sanlu University, Sun Rouqia tearfully confided in Fang Hongjian that there was a male instructor named Lu Zixiao who had been pursuing her relentlessly, and she didn't know how to reject him, so she asked Fang Hongjian to help her figure out what to do. This move appeared to be asking for help, but in reality, it was planting a seed of jealousy in Fang Hongjian's heart. She placed these words next to that seed, spoken as if casually. "Outside, there's so much gossip, it's really annoying." The implication being, "Everyone's talking about us now. Do you really feel nothing for me at all? Fang Hongjian began asking himself, if I didn't love Miss Sun, why would I care about any of this? Do I love her even just a little bit? She pushed a man from "we are colleagues" across the threshold into "do I love her?" Step 5. Linking arms in public, forcing an engagement. This was the final move in the entire scheme, and the step that would draw the most criticism towards Sun Rouqia for the next 70 years. That evening, Sun Rouqia and Fang Hongjian happened to run into each other on the street. Just then, two people appeared behind them, Li Meiting and her suitor, Lu Zixiao. Sun Rouqia reached out and grabbed Hongjian's right arm as if seeking his protection, and hesitantly began to speak, saying half a sentence. "So we'll tell Mr. Li." Her words stopped there. What came next didn't need to be said by her. The two onlookers picked up where she left off. "Oh, so you two are engaged?" Under the gaze of the two men, Fang Hongjian found himself trapped in an impossible situation. If he denied it at this moment, it would mean publicly destroying the reputation of a young woman who depended on him and trusted him in that era. Such damage to a woman was real and severe. He didn't deny it. And just like that, the engagement was settled. Years later, on the night when their marriage completely fell apart, Fang Hongjian unleashed years of pent-up rage and said, "You schemed in every possible way to marry me. It was all your manipulations, all your traps." Seeing this, it's very easy for us to make a judgment about Sun Rouqia. She's too calculating, too frightening. This has been the first reaction of the vast majority of readers toward her for over 70 years. But if we pause and think about one question, a young woman in her early 20s, during the war-torn 1940s, traveled alone to a remote mountainous region to take up her post. Her family background was ordinary, and she wasn't even valued in her own home. Her younger brother was the favored child. She had no prestigious background, no family she could rely on, and on a journey fraught with danger for women, she had to protect herself, all alone. In that era, what was the situation for a woman without any protection? She eavesdropped on Fang Hongjian's conversation, not to scheme against him, but because she was studying a person she needed to understand. She had to know who he was to judge whether she was safe with him. When she said, "I don't know how to conduct myself," she was using the only acceptable way of that era for a woman to ask a man for help. She took his arm because that was the last card she had to play. In a world where once her reputation was ruined, she would have nowhere to go. Of course, she calculated. But put any young woman traveling alone in that era in the same situation, what would you do? There's one line that perhaps captures it more accurately than any definitive judgment. It was written by Jiang Qian Zhongshu's wife, the witness to the birth of Fortress Besieged. She described Sun Rouqia this way: "She has no particular talents, but she's not stupid either. She's not a beauty, but she's not ugly. She has no special interests, yet she has her own opinions." An ordinary woman with her own mind, in an era when women had virtually no choices, used the only tool she possessed to secure an outcome for herself. That tool was her cleverness. She won. She married Fang Hongjian. But this was only the beginning of the story. That tool was her intelligence. She won. She married Fang Hongjian. But this was only the beginning of the story. Because she would soon discover that entering the besieged fortress didn't mean she was safe. After Fang Hongjian got married, he was in for quite a shock. That Sun Rouqia, who was too shy to even say a word, vanished. That Sun Rouqia, who said, "I'm so clueless about how to conduct myself, Mr. Fang. Would you be willing to teach me?" had vanished. Standing before him now was a neither childish nor naive, quite sophisticated and worldly wise, and quite stubborn with a mind of her own. Before marriage and after marriage, she was like two completely different people. A feeling took root in Fang Hongjian's heart. That feeling was called being deceived and duped. This judgment would permeate their entire marriage from that point forward. Every time they argued, Fang Hongjian carried this feeling with him. I was set up by her. The person I fell in love with never existed. All that gentleness and compliance before marriage was an act. I am prey that's been hunted down. He shared this feeling with his readers. And for over 70 years, most readers of Fortress Besieged have accepted this interpretation. Sun Rouqia became a completely different person before and after marriage, which shows her premarital gentleness was all an act, and her true nature is domineering and controlling. This judgment sounds extremely reasonable, until you realize one thing: the narrative perspective throughout Fortress Besieged consistently stays close to Fang Hongjian. His eyes are our eyes. His feelings are our feelings. We never truly enter Sun Rouqia's inner world, never know what she's thinking, never know what she sees, never know how many words are stuck in her throat that she can't speak. And what kind of narrator is Fang Hongjian? A man who has never truly loved Sun Rouqia. A man who has always kept Tang Xiaofu's ghost alive in his heart. A weak man, prone to self-deception, who loves to use fate to excuse himself. For a man like this, what fairness can there be in the judgment he passes on a wife he never loved in the first place? Let me look at that transformation again. Before marriage, Sun Rouqia was gentle, naive, helpless. Was this the real her? Not entirely. But it wasn't a lie either. That was how a young woman traveling alone had to present herself in that particular situation, because the rules of that era told all women you must position yourself below men to exist safely. After marriage, Sun Rouqia became tough, opinionated, and controlling. Was this her true nature? Perhaps a more accurate way to put it is, this is what she looks like when she can finally be herself. Marriage gave her a socially safe. It gave her a position that was safe in a social sense. She no longer needed to constantly maintain that persona of being weak and compliant. She could finally express her true opinions, stand firm on what she believed was right, and say no in a less roundabout way. For Fang Hongjian, this was called showing her true colors. But from another perspective, for Sun Rouqia, this was called finally not having to put on an act anymore. The problem is, Fang Hongjian fell in love with that performance, not the real her. This is the most common tragedy in marriage, and it doesn't belong only to Fang Hongjian and Sun Rouqia. During the courtship period, both people present their best selves, or the side most likely to win the other person over. But when the pressures of marriage arrive and their true personalities surface, both sides begin to feel that this person isn't the one I knew. Fang Hongjian didn't suddenly change after marriage either. Was the Fang Hongjian on that journey moved by Sun Rouqia's? Was the Fang Hongjian who was touched by Sun Rouqia's delicate and dependent demeanor the real him? That was a Fang Hongjian who had just been rejected by Tang Xiaofu, with a huge void in his heart, desperately needing to be needed, to be admired, to be depended upon. Sun Rouqia appeared at exactly the right time, filling exactly the right void. He thought he was moved, but in reality, he was merely consoled. Being comforted isn't love. He never admitted this either. Literary critic Wen Rumin summarized the image of Sun Rouqia after marriage like this: domineering, jealous, selfish, mean-spirited, constantly scheming about how to control the household and dominate her husband. This has been the version widely accepted by readers for 70 years. But has anyone noticed, where exactly do these words come from? They come from Fang Hongjian's perspective, filtered through the narrative lens, and seep into the understanding of readers and critics. In a novel where the narrative perspective is so closely aligned with the male protagonist, this boundary becomes extremely blurred. When Rumin himself also admits that Sun Rouqia is not a bad person, she's simply one of those old-fashioned, burdened women weighed down by tradition. Her personality transformation is the result of traditional culture's long-term oppression of women, not her natural disposition. Another researcher directly points out, the narrative of Fortress Besieged consistently stands on Fang Hongjian's side, granting him the power to define Sun Rouqia. The power to define Sun Rouqia, while Sun Rouqia herself never gets a chance in this novel to defend herself, never gets an opportunity to tell her version from her own perspective. She was written into someone else's story, lived through someone else's eyes for over 70 years. There's another detail, easily overlooked, but it reveals so much. After marriage, Sun Rouqia's salary was exactly double that of Fang Hongjian's. She was the one who was actually more capable and made a greater financial contribution to the household. Yet, in the marriage, she was passive in every way. Her in-laws didn't accept her, her husband didn't understand her, and whenever she tried to have a say in household decisions, she was either dismissed or bypassed entirely. A woman with real capabilities in the workplace had to resort to the same tactics of appearing weak that she used before marriage, just to earn respect at home. But this time, even those tactics stopped working. Is her controlling behavior in this context really controlling? Or was she originally a capable, opinionated woman who, within the structure of marriage, gradually ground down her instinct to fight for space into stubbornness and confrontation? Fang Hongjian's assessment of Sun Rouqia was that she was a petty, unreasonable shrew. When he said this, he was simultaneously doing something else in his mind, comparing her to Tang Xiaofu. He'd been comparing them all along. Sun Rouqia wasn't marrying the real Fang Hongjian. She was marrying a Fang Hongjian who always wore Tang Xiaofu tinted glasses. Behind this filter, she would always be the one who failed, always the one who couldn't measure up, but she didn't know this. Or perhaps she knew, but was powerless to change it. Just like that lamentation from Yang Jiangsun, Rouqia's greatest success was marrying a Fang Hongjian. Her greatest failure was also marrying Fang Hongjian. She had chased after him, entered the city. It's just that no one told her what awaited her inside that city. Qian Zhongshu wrote a line in Fortress Besieged that reads like a casual stroke of the pen, yet it speaks volumes about the structural tragedy of the marriage between Fang and Sun. The Fang family and the Sun family, these two in-law families, had met, entertained each other, exchanged visits, and even silently traded their mutual contempt. Neither was satisfied with the other. The Fang family resented the Sun family's casual attitude, while the Sun family found the Fang family old-fashioned, and behind each other's backs, both sides complained that the other wasn't wealthy enough. The elders on both sides looked down on each other, leaving Hongjian and Rouqia caught in the middle, suffering endless grievances. They had no choice but to take it out on each other. These 9 words are the most precise dissection of the entire marriage. Let's start from the beginning. When Sun Rouqia married into the Fang family, she couldn't even get past the first hurdle. During the wedding ceremony, she insisted on not kneeling, only bowing with clasped hands. In the eyes of the older generation of the Fang family, a daughter-in-law who refused to kneel during the ceremony was failing to observe proper etiquette, showing disrespect to the Fang family, and displaying the arrogance of a modern woman. Old Mrs. Fang's expression darkened on the spot, and she didn't even give her a meeting gift. Where exactly was Sun Rouqia being arrogant? She was simply an educated woman who didn't want to perform what she felt was a humiliating ritual at a wedding she hadn't wholeheartedly accepted for people she didn't truly know. But that crack from that moment on, was embedded into the foundation of this marriage. And then came the issue of the dowry. Fang Hongjian's two sisters-in-law, the second and third mistresses, came to pay a visit. The two of them secretly took inventory of the dowry Sun Rouqia had brought with her. Sun Rouqia's dowry wasn't actually prepared by the Sun family themselves, but was purchased on their behalf by her aunt, Mrs. Lu, which really tells you everything you need to know about the Sun family's financial situation. But that wasn't even the cruelest cut. The cruelest part was this. The second lady and third lady calculated the time between the engagement and the wedding. They exchanged knowing smiles. The meaning behind those smiles was all too clear without words. They were insinuating that Sun Rouqia had been indiscreet before marriage, possibly rushing into wedlock because she was already pregnant. Sun Rouqia sensed all of this. Who could she confide in? She couldn't make a scene on the spot. She was the newly arrived daughter-in-law. She had to maintain the appearance of decorum. She couldn't talk to her mother-in-law. Her mother-in-law had never given her a kind look to begin with. She had no one to vent to, only Fang Hongjian. She went back to find Fang Hongjian and said the most heated words in all the conflicts between the two families. Our Sun family is poor. We didn't have much to give our daughter when she married. Did your Fang family spend any bride price on marrying a daughter-in-law? Did you give your daughter-in-law anything? These two rooms were still paying the rent for them. What did this remark sound like to Fang Hongjian? A provocation. She was attacking his family. She had turned their marriage into a battlefield. What was it in Sun Rouqia's heart? Grievance. The grievance of being humiliated to her face, mocked behind her back, yet having to swallow it all down, and then returning to the only safe place to finally let it out. The same words, two different feelings. Neither one is wrong, but when you put them together, they can only produce one result, an argument. Old Mrs. Fang's remark followed the same logic. Once during a meal, old Mrs. Fang looked at Fang Hongjian and casually said, "You've gotten thinner lately." She paused, then added, "Rouqia's so busy with work, she doesn't have time to look after you properly." Breaking this sentence down. On the surface, it's concern for her son, but underneath, it's a criticism of her daughter-in-law. You're too busy with work, neglecting your husband. That's your failure as a wife. If we peel back another layer of the subtext, my son married you and got the short end of the stick. After Mrs. Fang said this, does she feel like it was just casually remarking? Perhaps she was. But Sun Rouqia felt the full weight of it. After returning home, she confronted Fang Hongjian. "Why didn't you speak up for me?" Fang Hongjian felt wronged. "My mother just made a casual remark. Why are you making such a big deal out of it?" The two of them entered a cold war over this, which then escalated into an argument. The content of their arguments gradually shifted from "what happened today" to "how your Fang family always does this and that," and then to "how your Sun family always does this and that." All the accumulated grievances between the two families exploded completely between these two closest people. In all these conflicts, there was one person who remained at the very center, yet was mentioned the least. That was Sun Rouqia's aunt, Mrs. Lu. Mrs. Lu had studied in America. Her husband was the chief engineer of a major textile mill, and she herself served as head of the personnel department at the factory. She was Sun Rouqia's most important emotional support and financial pillar in Shanghai. Mrs. Lu bought her trousseau. Mrs. Lu arranged her job, and when Sun Rouqia suffered grievances in her marriage, she was the first person Sun confided in. In Fang Hongjian's eyes, Mrs. Lu was the most destructive external interference in his marriage. Whenever Sun Rouqia had a conflict with him, she'd run off to her aunt's place, where the two of them would discuss what was wrong with Fang Hongjian. Fang Hongjian knew about this, or rather, he was certain of it, even when he wasn't entirely sure. She's bad-mouthing me behind my back. This thought constantly occupied his mind. And Mrs. Lu even offered to use her connections to arrange a job for Fang Hongjian at the factory. This was genuinely well-intentioned. But for Fang Hongjian, this kindness turned into an unacceptable humiliation. He said something very characteristic of Fang Hongjian. "I won't be a lackey to the capitalist's lackey." He'd rather be unemployed than find a job through his wife's aunt. Because that would mean he was a notch below Sun Rouqia. It would mean he was living off his wife's family connections. It would mean his masculine pride was being trampled completely into the ground. Sun Rouqia looked at him, probably feeling genuinely desperate. "My aunt is helping us. What kind of face are you trying to save? We need this job. If you refuse it, what are we going to live on?" The conflict between two people is never just about incompatible personalities, but about completely different ways of confronting reality. Sun Rouqia was a pragmatist: survive first, talk about everything else later. Fang Hongjian prioritized his dignity. He'd rather struggle than bow his head. Two different philosophies, neither one absolutely wrong, but when placed within the same marriage, they can only keep clashing with each other. Qian Zhongshu put it so precisely: having suffered enough frustration, they had no choice but to take it out on each other. This wasn't two people naturally incompatible. These were two people who had each endured too much grievance in their original families, yet neither could find an outlet. So they dumped all those grievances on the only place they could vent each other. Sun Rouqia suffered contempt at her in-laws' home, but didn't dare lash out at her parents-in-law or sisters-in-law, so she could only come back and take it out on Fang Hongjian. Fang Hongjian suffers losses in front of his aunt and finds himself in a financially weak position, so he can only come back and take it out on Sun Rouqia. The two of them take turns, becoming each other's punching bag. Neither of them meant any harm. Neither of them had ever been properly caught by the other. There's a term in psychology called transmission of trauma. It refers to when a person carries unbearable pain with nowhere to place it. It doesn't disappear. It simply transfers to the person closest to them. Sun Rouqia suffered grievances she couldn't handle, which turned into her being domineering and controlling toward Fang Hongjian. Fang Hongjian felt suffocated, with no way to communicate, and this turned into repeated coldness and evasion. They passed their pain to each other, then received new pain back from the other. This cycle had never stopped, until it stopped that night, not because one side was completely wrong, but because neither of them could catch what the other was throwing anymore. There's a way marriages die, not through spectacular betrayal, not through some sudden rupture on a particular day, but through two people using their most instinctive ways to push each other, bit by bit, toward the same ending. Fang Hongjian and Sun Rouqia, that's how they died. Sun Rouqia kept pushing harder and harder. After the marriage, she tried to take control of the household affairs. She tried to find out where Fang Hongjian went every day, who he was with, and what they talked about. She didn't like Fang Hongjian's frequent contact with Zhao Xinmei. Seeing it as a hidden danger, Zhao Xinmei knew Tang Xiaofu, and that connection had to be severed. She opposed Fang Hongjian going to Chongqing to seek Zhao Xinmei's help in finding a job. She knew exactly what she was guarding against. She just couldn't say it out loud. So she used control to replace the words she couldn't bring herself to say. "I'm afraid you'll leave me." Fang Hongjian felt increasingly suffocated. After every argument, he chose the same approach: silence, withdrawal, walking out the door, retreating to his study, or simply storming off in a huff, staying away until he'd had enough before coming back. It's not that he wasn't in pain, he just didn't know how to stay in that pain. So he used avoidance to replace the words he was powerless to say. I don't know how to love you. One chases harder and harder, the other runs farther and farther. This isn't just Sun Rouqia's personal tragedy, nor is it just Fang Hongjian's personal tragedy. Marriage psychology has a specific term to describe this pattern, called the pursuer-distancer cycle. The more one party pursues and pressures, the more the other party withdraws. The more the other party retreats, the deeper this person's fear becomes, leading to even more intense pursuit. This more intense pursuit then triggers an even deeper retreat. The cycle continues endlessly, until one day, both people are completely exhausted. Sun Rouqia is anxious. This anxiety isn't unfounded melodrama, it has roots. She was the overlooked one in her family from childhood. Her younger brother was her parents' precious darling, and she'd been taking care of herself since her teenage years. Someone who grew up feeling that love is unstable and must be fought for, develops a sensitivity to relationships far beyond that of ordinary people. Fang Hongjian carried Tang Xiaofu's ghost in his heart, and she could sense it. His passive attitude toward marriage, she could sense that too. Every time he fell silent or avoided her, it was a signal to her. He's leaving. He doesn't love me anymore. I'm going to lose him. So she gripped even harder. And the harder she gripped, the more controlling she appeared. The more controlling she seemed, the more Fang Hongjian wanted to escape. With all her effort, she personally accelerated the end of their marriage. This wasn't intentional. It was the automatic result of that logic of fear running deep within her. Fang Hongjian was an avoider. He wasn't a bad person. He just wasn't good at staying present with emotions. When confronted with conflict, his first instinct wasn't to face it, but to escape. He uses silence to shut out arguments, escape to avoid pressure, and sighs of fate playing tricks to excuse his own inaction. Research has shown that when conflict arises in a relationship, persistent stonewalling, when one party completely shuts down communication and stops responding, is one of the most accurate warning signals of a marriage falling apart. Fang Hongjian's silence when faced with Sun Rouqia's questioning, his retreating figure as he left the house, his disappearance into the study, each instance was telling the relationship, I don't intend to solve this. I just want to get away from here. Every time he retreated, it only deepened Sun Rouqia's anxiety. The root of the problem wasn't about which person was worse. The root of the problem was that she was using the wrong tool. Sun Rouqia was clever. This never needed to be questioned. She could precisely identify Fang Hongjian's weaknesses, could quietly lay her plans during their journey together, and could earn twice as much as her husband in the workplace. In terms of intellect, she was more than a cut above Fang Hongjian. But winning someone over and nurturing a relationship require completely different things. Winning someone over relies on strategy, seeing through the other person, identifying their weaknesses, and striking with precision. Building a relationship relies on trust, letting down your guard, being willing to show vulnerability, and accepting uncertainty. Sun Rouqia used strategy to win over Fang Hongjian, and she succeeded. But she didn't know how to transform that same wisdom into what marriage truly needs, a sense of security that requires no control, no calculation, and allows the other person to come and go freely. Because that kind of security can only grow from within. It cannot be substituted by controlling external factors. There's a striking finding from a Chinese household tracking survey. Among the highly educated women surveyed, married women's happiness levels were on average lower than single women under similar circumstances. One interpretation of this finding is women with high control needs once they enter marriage, which is a domain that cannot be fully controlled. They face continuous experiences of losing control, which actually makes them more miserable than when they lived alone. Sun Rouqia probably understood this kind of pain. she just had no way to stop. And there was one thing she had never been able to resolve. Before marriage, she had won over a man. But when that person entered the marriage, he carried the shadow of another woman in his heart. After marriage, every time Fang Hongjian quarreled with Sun Rouqia, he would unconsciously compare her to Tang Xiaofu in his mind. Sun Rouqia was forever the one who couldn't win in that comparison. It wasn't because she wasn't good enough. It was because Tang Xiaofu's place in his heart had never been that of another real woman, but rather a phantom forever frozen in the most beautiful moment, a perfect fantasy that no real person could ever defeat. Sun Rouqia was destined to lose in her competition with that phantom, but she didn't stop, because stopping would mean giving up. It was in this exhaustion and anxiety and refusal to let go that Fang Hongjian and Sun Rouqia walked together toward that evening. That night, with the old clock that was 5 hours slow, that night, Fang Hongjian came home. He had been walking outside for a long time. The two of them had a huge fight the day before, and he left in anger, cooling off outside for the entire day. Before returning, he quietly made a decision. Tonight, he would be good to her. He'd persuade her not to let yesterday's quarrel spoil things between them as husband and wife. This marriage had become too exhausting. He didn't want to fight anymore. He'd swallow his pride, get through today, and deal with tomorrow when it came. With that thought in mind, he pushed open the door. Then he heard Sun Rouqia's voice. She was on the phone, pouring her heart out to her aunt, complaining about all his faults and wrongdoings. He stood there, listening for a moment. At this point, Sun Rouqia had actually just finished an inner struggle of her own. She too had been waiting for him to come home. She also had a thought in her heart. She hoped that this time he could put aside that bit of stubbornness, go work at his aunt's factory, and the two of them could live their days properly together. She was exhausted too. But while waiting, the sense of grievance surfaced again. Too many pent-up grievances in that quiet house. They found the only place where she could speak her aunt on the other end of the phone. She hadn't expected him to come back at this moment. She hadn't expected him to hear. But in reality, Fang Hongjian hadn't truly heard anything. He pushed the door open and came in, only catching a few vague phrases, not clear what she had said. Sun Rouqia heard the sound and turned around to challenge him. "It wasn't meant for you to hear anyway. Who told you to eavesdrop?" The moment those words left her mouth, it was as good as admitting it herself. She had indeed been bad-mouthing him behind his back just now. Originally, the two of them each harbored thoughts of backing down, standing at the doorway, almost on the verge of reconciliation. Just almost. And then, with that one sentence, every possibility slammed shut. The argument started up again, and it was even fiercer than yesterday. Because today, there was an added layer, a sense of betrayal. He had intended to treat her well, yet she had accused him of eavesdropping right to his face. Now he couldn't bring himself to back down anymore. Sun Rouqia felt a wave of despair wash over her, felt all the grievances accumulated over the years converging in that single moment. She didn't realize how ironic this was. She had just poured her heart out on the phone, and he had overheard it, though he actually hadn't heard much. And he used it as a weapon against her. She had been waiting for him to come home so they could have a nice time together, but instead, it turned into this. The two of them argued deeper and deeper. All the words they'd been holding back for so long came pouring out. Then, Sun Rouqia said those words. Coward. This word struck at the one truth Fang Hongjian had spent his entire life refusing to face. He actually knew it. He knew that Zhao Xinmei had said long ago that he was not disagreeable, but utterly useless. He knew his feelings for Tang Xiaofu had been cowardly. His entry into marriage had been cowardly. His avoidance of family conflicts had been cowardly. He had always known, but he had never admitted it. Now Sun Rouqia had said it out loud. That was the most unbearable moment of all, his self-deception being pierced through face to face by the person closest to him with the most accurate words. He could no longer hold on to that thought of being good to her tonight. He poured out all the anger and regret from their marriage. Why did we end up like this? It was all you scheming to marry me, all your manipulations, all your traps. After he finished speaking, the room fell silent. Sun Rouqia, taking Lima with her, left the house and went to her aunt's place. Fang Hongjian remained alone in the room. He fell into a deep sleep. Then that old clock spoke. Dong, 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 6 times. At the end of his novel, Qian Zhongshu wrote this passage. That ancestral old clock began to strike leisurely and unhurriedly, as if it had been storing up half a day's worth of time, waiting for the deep silence of night to bring it all out and count it piece by piece. Bong, 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 6 strikes in all. 6 o'clock was 5 hours ago, when Hongjian was on his way home, determined in his heart to treat Rouqia well and persuade her not to let yesterday's matter cause discord between husband and wife. At that moment, Rouqia was at home waiting for Hongjian to return for dinner, hoping he would make peace with his aunt and take a job at her factory. This outdated timepiece unintentionally contains an irony and melancholy about life that runs deeper than all words, all laughter and tears. 5 hours ago, he wanted to treat her well. 5 hours ago, she was waiting for him to come home. Each had good intentions, yet not a shred of that goodwill reached the other. A clock running 5 hours slow doesn't strike out anyone's guilt, it strikes out humanity's shared desolation. We set out with hearts full of change, only to trip ourselves up at the very doorstep, again and again. So where exactly did Sun Rouqia go wrong? For over 70 years, the standard answer to this question has been, she was too calculating, too domineering after marriage, turning matrimony into a battlefield for control. But after going through her entire story, you'll discover that the real answer is far more complex. She had no malicious intent. She simply never had any sense of security. She orchestrated and pursued Fang Hongjian, but deep in her heart, a sense of security never truly took root. The gates of marriage opened. She entered the city, only to find that inside there wasn't the kind of stability she had imagined. So she picked up the tools she had once used outside the city: strategy, control, calculated moves, trying to fight her way back to that sense of security. But that tool, which worked outside the city, was ineffective inside it. Outside the city, strategy could help her win an outcome. In the city, only trust could help her keep a person. And these two things required completely different inner strengths. This feeling, perhaps, doesn't belong to Sun Rouqia alone. She exhausted all her cleverness to win a relationship. Yet within that relationship, she never truly relaxed. Sun Rouqia wasn't a bad person. She just poured all her intelligence into winning. But no one ever told her that keeping someone by your side doesn't work that way. Her greatest success was marrying Fang Hongjian. Her greatest failure was also marrying Fang Hongjian. After finishing this story, one question has stayed with me, and that is cleverness meant to be used to win someone over or to let someone go? That old clock, 5 hours behind, perhaps knows the answer, but it doesn't speak. It only turns those two undelivered kindnesses, one strike at a time, in the dead of night, into silence. This is the story of Sun Rouqia. If something came to your mind too, leave me a comment and let me know. Thanks for watching. This is Fanko Character Think Tank. See you next time.